But for now, to another piece of pandemic fallout. When this all started in March and April of 2020, the Massachusetts Department of Unemployment Assistance was fielding more than 600,000 claims a month. They were paying out money that was a lifeline to people. But now, as the Globe reported, the state's DUA is looking to get much of that money back to the tune of almost $3 billion. More precisely, for around 719,000 claims they say were overpaid over the course of 18 months. And let's be clear, this is not about fraud. This is money unemployed people receive through no fault of their own, and not surprisingly, in most cases, spent. Joining me now to discuss is Boston Globe columnist Larry Edelman. Larry, good to see you. Congratulations on this.
Oh, thanks, Jim.
And we also invite, I should have said, the State Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, Rosalind Acosta, to join us. She declined. So as I said, Larry, no fraud. So how did this happen?
How did it happen? There was a lot of confusion. I mean, think of all the jobless claims that were filed starting in March 2020. You know, just tens and tens of thousands of people getting thrown out of work in a very short period of time. And then the feds rolled out the federal benefits, the extension to state benefits, the PUA, so-called PUA for gig workers. And that just created enormous confusion because those were brand new programs, and you know, the DUA had to really scramble to get them out.
So should the state get a pass on blame here because of the overwhelming demand? As you say, gig workers were never covered before, not to mention the supplement for people who were covered. Should they get a pass? Or I've read so many stories in your paper about the antiquated system at the unemployment office.
Right. I think that the surge of claims that we saw during the pandemic would have overwhelmed even the most efficient of Department of Unemployment, you know, regardless whether it's Massachusetts. Massachusetts does have an antiquated system, so it just made matters worse. So I think you give them a little bit of a break on the actual mistakes. I think where the blame comes is in trying to claw them back.
So let's talk about that for a minute. The state is intending to claw them back, as you say. There's a waiver system where an individual who got the money can apply to get a break. One,
right.
Is that on the state, federal, or both? And two, what's the criteria for qualification for a waiver?
Well, it's on both. You can claim a waiver for either regular state benefits or the federal benefits. The criteria are a little bit vague, but essentially, as Shirley Leung, my colleague, wrote today, if you spent the money on a mortgage or just basic essentials, then you can't claim a waiver. If your expenses are currently more than your income, you could seek a waiver. Or if you bought like a car, like a one-time big expense, you can seek a waiver. But the problem people are having is that the Department of Unemployment Assistance is hardly much assistance at all these days. You can't get anybody on the phone. You can't get a straight answer. It takes months and months to resolve these issues, and people are just stressed out.
Well, you know, also, I thought Shirley made a great point in her piece today. Is I used to be a lawyer representing tenants, and if a tenant had a lawyer, it was a good chance they'd get an extension of time to pay the rent. Rent may even be forgiven. If you went in and represented yourself, you were pretty much doomed to lose. That's likely the scenario here, and I assume out of hundreds of thousands of people, most of these people probably don't even know about a waiver, and if they do, aren't going to be able to get a lawyer.
Exactly. So if the state comes back at you for $20,000, $30,000, it may be worthwhile to hire a lawyer who may charge you $3,000 to handle the case. But if you're a low-income worker and you might owe $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, that might not be such a great investment.
You know, of all the stuff you've written about this, the one line that I cannot get out of my head is near the end, I think, of your first story. It's almost like a throwaway line, but it stuck with me. You're nodding because you know the line I'm going to read, that the federal government, and again, more than half of this money is from the feds. I should have made that clear, of the almost $3 billion. The federal government bailed out Wall Street, including AIG, and I'll add to what you wrote, and after they bailed out AIG gave hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses to their top employees. What's wrong with this picture? Wall Street gets
Right.
bailed out. Regular people who are suffering, who more than likely spent the money, aren't bailed out. That's the
Yeah,
bottom line.
it's to me, that's what's the most compelling thing about the story is the whole unfairness of it all. And look, are there some people in there who tried to game the system? Absolutely. Are there people who played by all the rules and are only later told, months later, told that they have to pay the money back? Absolutely. I think that's most of the people. And so why can't we find a way to at least hit the pause button on this and to sort it out, come up with a easier way to get those waivers, maybe clearer rules, make the process better known to the public, and then go through it, find the people who committed fraud, right? Take them out of the equation, and then come up with a solution for the average person.
But you know, the man who is the master of this issue, Shirley interviewed, who his, the 9/11 fund, the One Boston Fund, all that sort of stuff, and said the reality is we're not going to be able to do a case-by-case basis with 700,000 people. We'll all be dead. There's got to be some rule that applies to the vast majority of these people. And the thing, yet another prediction, Larry, that I made that was dead wrong. I assumed after your first story, elected leaders would be lining up to say, let's find a way to forgive that money. But is there one person in an elective office who says anything other than some level of sympathy, that there should be some waivers? But no one's talking big picture, are they?
No, they really aren't. And, we asked the governor this question just a little while ago.
Oh, what'd he say?
He said, that basically they're following the Fed's rules when it comes to the federal dollars. But the Fed's allow waivers. And he also said something strange, which I don't quite get, is he said there have been no clawbacks. So I don't know what semantic game he's playing there. But clearly the estate is demanding the money and getting the money from people. So I'm not quite sure what he meant by that. But we know how Baker works, and it takes him a while to read the tea leaves, see which way the wind's blowing before he'll come out and take a stand on something. So hopefully we can just keep hammering away at this issue, and make it, as high profile as we can and put the pressure on.
And we should say, you talked to some individuals who were involved in this. I know there was, I think, a woman who was in her 60s who was one of the people who owes something like $80,000. She's talking about how she's got to take money out of her retirement account. Another person you spoke to said it was all spent on necessities. How do I buy a car? How do I get a mortgage? How do I whatever? So the pain here is real, no?
It's very real. It is very real. And think about it. It's analogous to getting the IRS coming after you, telling you, "Oh, we've audited you and you owe us this huge amount of money." How would you feel? All of a sudden, there's this request from the state for $10,000, $20,000, $50,000.
Well, I would have to disagree with you. I think it's far worse than the IRS auditing you. When the IRS audits you, it doesn't follow an affirmative act by the federal government or the Internal Revenue Service where they say, we gave you this money, now give it back. The state gave this money or sent this money to individuals who, in the vast majority of cases, in good faith, accepted the money and spent the money. And now, to use a legal term, they are totally screwed. Now, before you go, one person who showed great sympathy is not an elected leader. I think he talked to you, Jim Braude, head of the Boston Chamber. While he's concerned about the cost for businesses that contribute to the fund, he showed a great amount of sympathy, empathy for the individuals, and thought some serious amount of relief should be granted. Am I correct?
You are correct. And businesses, it's not fair for us to expect businesses to cover the cost of this, and that's who funds unemployment at the state level. Now, they didn't fund the government programs, but that's why I think we've got to hit the pause button and figure out how to deal with this.
And Rooney said, take it out of the federal ARPA money, take it out of the state surplus, but do something. If we can do it for the banks, as you said, we should be able to do it for real people.
Exactly.
Larry, great reporting, great story. Stay on it, and we'll stay on you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Jim.
Be well.
Bye.